So we're back here, possibly discussing the finale of the marriage series. Possibly, unless we decide to discover polygyny, not ourselves, but technically, and well, maybe ourselves as well. You never know.
Yourself.
Well, I don't know, Barry. You say that, but hey, we've discussed pre-marriage, what age to get married. We've discussed how to choose your partner. Today, we're going to discuss marital ceremonies and marriage itself. How to make a success and thrive in your marriage. Well, welcome back to another episode of Magical Musings. As you can see, we're back with a panel again, and we're discussing the subject of marriage itself. So, Bobby, let me start with you. Did you have a big shadi, or was it a small nikah kind of an affair?
The wedding was big because
it's Bobby's wedding. Eh?
No. It was because I think there's a few things. One, our brotherly is big. Back when we got married, there was not this thing about two people can come per family.
Okay.
It was literally everyone is invited, per card. I can remember really clearly when we were dishing out the cards, I kept cards with me in the car just in case I bumped into someone that, needed to invite. So then it was literally the barber was invited, the butcher was invited.
Wow.
Basically, it's like a community event.
Mm.
You see?
Where was it? In the town hall? Or
It was in the town hall, yes. And similarly, where my wife is from, up north, they did something similar.
Mm.
So it was the norm at that time.
Yeah.
Like this year, I've been to many weddings, many during the summer period. And I've seen two kind of trends, if you like. One is to have that big wedding with all the trimmings, right? That includes
we went to one together, didn't we?
Yeah. So the big cars, expensive venue, a large menu, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Then the other side of I came across as well, which was actually 200 people maximum. Okay. And there was segregation there, and I felt comfortable in that one more so myself. And the reason is, for me, when there's like it was more to do with the segregation aspect.
Right.
For me.
Yeah.
That's important, I feel, that when we have gatherings in our community, the ladies on that day, they do dress up. All right. And I remember watching a TikTok video, right? It was during Ramadan, actually. And there's this lad, and they were just doing pranks in it, right? So he's like, prank video, if you like. But he was like, I went to Tarawih, and I stood and prayed next to her dad, trying to impress him.
Yeah.
So, but it gives the mindset, and we shouldn't be naive to this, that young blood does look, we can't be naive.
Yeah, of course.
And when you got someone that's all glamoured up and you're in the hall, blah, 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 you're going to look, and everyone's looking.
Yeah.
So therefore, that uncomfortable, I'm really uncomfortable with that. So for me, segregation is critical in a wedding so you can enjoy it properly.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I meet up with the people in the weddings, cousins, friends, people that I don't know, I really enjoy the day. Really, really enjoy it. I'm comfortable with it. Everything's really nice. You do dua that it's a successful wedding, etc. But I think the weddings now have become haves and have-nots.
So how long has it been since you got married?
That's a good question.
Let's just hope your wife's
2000 and somewhere 2006. Somewhere 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got married a year before me then. What about you, Barry? How long has it been for you now?
20 years.
Wow, mashallah. Mashallah. And was yours a big wedding, or was it?
Yeah, mine was in a tent in the village back home, but
okay. No, but still, yeah.
But alhamdulillah, I think it goes on to that point. I'm always in favor of really big weddings. Not glamorous weddings, but actually big numbers. So even being brought up, I mean, I was used to 2,000 people at wedding, 2,500 people at wedding. And for me, actually, what made my wedding wasn't that it was in a tent in some barrier back home. It was actually 30 of my friends went with me. All of my family went with me. There was all of my relatives there. And that's what actually, I mean, there's plenty of stories and things like that we could go through. But it was a really nice time for me. And the time was not because of any glamour that was there, but actually the people who were there with me.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that time because of that.
Was it an expensive wedding, or was it mediocre? It was
It
big
sounds
in
really
numbers,
good because
it was.
it's very cheap. And
Yeah, for us. But what about for people over there?
it was very cheap, very simple, very cheap. But actually, even whoever now went to the wedding, they'll never forget that time because imagine 30 lads from here.
Yeah.
Everyone's normally busy in their normal lives here, but when you're there, you spend a month together.
Yeah.
And you're going to have memories for the rest of your life. And even here, you go to weddings, you meet family you've never met. Imagine 2,000 people at a wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what makes it for me. And that's why I say there's always a debate at home. We should have small weddings. Fine, you don't want a guy standing behind your chair in town all to finish when you've eaten. But actually to get,
I remember them days.
2,000 people.
I was that guy.
And,
on a number of occasions.
to get, my nephew got married, I think we had over 2,000 and it was like managing a football stadium. But it was lovely because actually all of those people together, it's a really nice event, I think. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. What about you, Cam? Yours was a small.
Yeah. I mean, I had a small, simple wedding, which I think mentioned before. But I think what I did want to say was talking about you guys now. I think it's a good idea the way that you guys have mentioned having a lot of people, because obviously to be hospitable and this is the sunnah, isn't it? Like it's to call out and it's to discuss these kinds of things with people, but it's not about the glamour of it. And I think that's where it gets mixed up. The have and have not enough that you just mentioned. And I think like it is funny the way I'm kind of glad, to be honest. It's you understood what people are like. You can't it's easier to say let's have segregation in the wedding than it is to say to the women chill a little bit with how you dress, because that you're never going to win that fight. Know that's an argument that you could never. It becomes a case of where's Wally, but looking for the bride. With how much all of them dress up, right? Like, it's hard to know in it at times. Like it's hard to know who's the bride and who's not. Like everyone's dolled up to that level. But you are right. I think there is a case of young blood's going to forget young blood. Even old blood nowadays, Billah gets riled up, and it's not something that I want for my wife, for my daughter, for my sisters to be in that environment. And it is, I think, with the glamour of modern weddings, the TikTok or the social media weddings, everything's about, have you got the right angle? Have you got the right lighting? And I think that's worrying, isn't it?
So, 100%.
Before I got married, I didn't really realize the impact of marriage itself. We're going to obviously go into it. But I remember on the nikah, the day of my nikah, my uncle, he said to me, he says, look, don't smile too much. Right.
Okay.
Don't get too excited because it's a celebration. Don't get too excited.
But there's some wisdom behind it.
Do you want the reason and the rationale simply was you're going to take someone's daughter.
Yeah.
And that was daunting on me. And I don't think many people actually realize that actually you're taking someone's, pearl.
Yeah.
Someone's treasure.
Someone's coolness of their
eyes. That's right. And then for me, when I appreciated that point, then this glamour thing, it knocked it out of me. Because I was thinking, if I turn up with loads of lads, with all these flash cars, what impression do I give to that family?
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? What impression am I leaving with them? And if I say, oh yeah, we went out to Morocco for a week for a stag thing. Wow, what impression is that giving to the father? Yeah. That's going to lead to serious anxiety for the father, to be honest with you.
And that has a knock-on effect in the future during the marriage.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Sorry, I was smiling. I thought Bobby was going to say, before I got married, I used to think for myself.
I think these are some thoughts of your inner...
I thought someone feels like I'm feeling. I was going to open my heart there. Sorry.
Bless. Okay, well, the thing is, I think one thing that we've pretty much agreed upon, and I think everybody's going to have their own opinion and stuff, but I think for us, we disagree on a fair bit as well. But I think one thing, because it's an Islamic notion, and fulfilling that part of your life in terms of getting married is equal to fulfilling half of your deen. There's a strong spiritual religious connotation to that. And because of that, we have to be obviously conscious of how it's done. And so we're probably agreed that, yes, there's no harm in having big weddings per se, but it's the lavishness which is... I mean, the Prophet ﷺ actually said the marriages which are blessed most are the ones that are simple and least expensive. I remember doing a khutbah at a nikah once, and I was asked to kind of compare and I remember coming across so many ayat when I was preparing for this, and it kind of reaffirmed certain things to me and reminded me of certain things and how sacred this bond is. It's not just about getting married as a ceremony, but there's a lot of responsibility, the religious obligations that are on us, on the bride and the groom, and the parents and the children and the wider family and the community, because marriage is a solution from a community perspective as well, because it's not just about individuals, it has an effect on how a community operates. So sorry, Bobby, you again.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a really good point that I just want to draw out from what you just said. Love is in this relationship, and you want to share this love with the community and the people that you love also, that happiness that it brings with it. And when you compare and contrast it to this boyfriend-girlfriend kind of concept, guys they hide it. It's top secret kind of stuff, right? Whereas this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He recognizes that there is this thing that we have, and it's called love. It's a need that both male and female need to live together, and they need that companionship, and it's done in a way which is structured. It builds responsibility, but it also celebrates it because you're doing it in such a good way. Everyone is in agreement. Your parents are in agreement. Her parents are in agreement. You're in agreement. And you're like, right, let's start this new life together. This new chapter in my life. And it is literally a new chapter. And you want to start it on a good basis. I think nowadays it's getting complicated now because people are coming in with university degrees and they're walking into this relationship with a lot of debt. The other side of the family are turning around and saying, okay, there's these financial kind of obligations to all of this. And therefore, the numbers invited to the wedding is trimming down because they're conscious of this element, cost of living crisis. When you got that kind of thing, economic landscape is a bit messy. You've got more of the back in the day, I would say that majority of the girls, if they were to work, they would work probably part-time. It wasn't a big thing. But now I think there is an element is I have my money and you've got yours, right? And I think when you walk,
what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine.
yeah. And when you try to open a new chapter, the rules of the game are different.
Yeah.
You have to then start thinking of slightly in a different way. And that I think can untangle this happiness. But from the get-go, that celebration is it needs to be done. And that's why the numbers thing I think is very important. Big numbers and whatever. As
Because these are some of the conditions of a marriage, not necessarily numbers, I say, but one of the conditions of marriage is the announcement of the marriage.
Yes, the
elan, and once that's done properly, then there is automatically, psychologically, there has an impact on the bride and groom as well. Like lots of people know we're together now. Yeah. So it's not just to protect them from fitna and also any talk in the community, or look at these two people together, this announced marriage now, but also it adds a sense of responsibility. All these people came together to wish us the best, and we've taken our vows as such to be together, to look after each other, and everything that a husband and wife should be doing for each other. It adds a sense of responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun lahun. You are basically garments over each other. Now, if we look at the meaning of that, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the word garment, why garments over each other? A garment protects you. A garment gives you warmth. A garment makes you feel confident. A garment can, the garment itself is not just something you wear, but if you think about not having a garment on, sometimes you feel incomplete.
vulnerable.
It also
You can feel
covers you.
vulnerable.
It covers all your flaws, doesn't it? All your
Covers your
defects,
flaws.
which is
Yeah.
something partners should be doing, which unfortunately they don't. I think one of the most important things is when it comes to most ceremonies, especially, and even a lot of marriages, the way people do it is we've got this Western idea in our minds. It's my day. It's my day to be happy. And I think that the way marriages should be, the best marriages should be, where the bride and groom are thinking more about their guests than they are about themselves. And if they do that, automatically people will start to enjoy that. The guests will enjoy that wedding a lot more. You'll get fewer people who just complain, roast taddoige. You know what I mean? Like, and this is usually why it ends up leading to where you have a bunch of people, even the bride and groom. I remember going to a wedding once, and me and my brothers and one, and it was in Manchester somewhere. I don't know. These are some cousins of ours, apparently. But you know how it goes. And we were there. I was only young, teenager, but I remember the wedding said that it started at 7. We were late. We got there around about 7:30, 7:45. The bride and groom weren't there yet. So we were there around about 7:45. We're waiting. The bride and groom didn't get there till about 9, 9:30. I was like, okay. And then the food still hasn't come out. Everyone just sat around.
You have to wait, yeah.
Yeah. And then what happens is the bride and groom are there for about half an hour. The food's still not. Then they get up and go out and they come back. And only after that, the food came out about 10 o'clock.
It still happens.
All I thought about was, I know for a fact, I have a feeling the bride and groom went out for a chippy. Booklet give you snabachari. You know what I mean? Like, it must have been the case. They've been starving all day. So that's more or less, but it is a case of what can I do? What can be done for me today? It's about my pictures. It's about my cake. It's about doing this, rather than just have a good time, enjoy with the people that you're there with, make announcement of what you've got. And there's a lot of barakah and there's a lot of wisdom in it, because it removes any of these doubts when you're talking about the boyfriend-girlfriend kind of dynamics, that situation. That always leaves room for, okay, this is my girl, right? But because I haven't claimed her fully, I'm not committed to her. By marrying her, she's still game for others. And this is actually one of the things marriage removes, because once you're married, you're like, hold up, that's my wife. Be careful what you're saying. Not only that, but even for the woman, it makes that crystal clear. There's loads of relationships where there's boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, and the girl is with a guy. She's going out with this guy, and then another guy who seems better than this guy comes up and starts saying lie. And when he goes, hold up, that's my girl, she says, hold up, I'm listening to him. Now, this guy's done. You get it? He can't do anything. He's lost his manhood. He's lost everything. She walks up. But if they're married, say, no, we're married. We're committed. I'm committed to you. You're committed to me. I don't think so. Are you willing to break this off? Know that the whole community, everyone will also know there's an extra level of commitment that you have to put into it. This is a social shield.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, Barry. You've been married for 20 years now. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless you with your marriage.
Ameen.
In those 20 years, if you were to be asked for advice from those 20, based on those 20 years, what makes marriage successful? What would you say are the core components of successful or thriving relationship in a marriage?
Now you put me on the spot, Majid.
That's the whole point to do.
I think what you mentioned, we could spend a whole podcast, and this what shows you it's not just when you mention the issue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they basically give us a manual to life.
100%.
If we apply that manual, we'll be successful. And this is exact same thing when it comes to relationships. We could do the whole podcast and solve a lot of our issues, even if we just went through how a husband and wife are a garment to each other.
Yeah.
You remove everything. MashaAllah, you mentioned it. And I was thinking, wow, actually, look at that. How we're in a society where a husband and wife, she does something wrong, you put it on Muslim mamas. My husband did this last night, he did this. Well, hold on a minute. Actually, you're a garment to each other. You hide each other's weaknesses.
100%.
We're in a society of exposure, social media. Actually, we're in a society that looks at the weaknesses in someone, even if they've got 99% goods. All of these things, you're a protection to each other. You know, one thing I would say is that I was very mature. I felt I was doing a paper round as a kid. I was working when I was 13. I felt for my age, I spent a lot of time, mashallah, in my youth with older people. I felt I was really mature. But actually, when I got married, I got a shock of my life. I thought, I'm taking someone's daughter. She's left her own security, her environment she's brought in. Hold on a minute. I've got to take care of her. She's my responsibility. I think for me, it's the biggest thing, and one thing I would say is being empathetic. Putting yourself in your wife's shoes, the wife putting herself in husband's shoes, not looking at each other's faults or weaknesses, but actually thinking, what is his day-to-day life? What does he go through? How can I support him? I think if there's one thing that I would say is being empathetic to each other. A lot more caring, a lot more loving, rather than this society makes you do is actually go head to head. This whole nonsense of masculinity culture, I'd start with that, and the whole feminist culture, it's about butting heads. Relationships don't work like that.
There's too many relationships that do exactly that, where the husband or wife, they're competing with each other. Unfortunately, I mean, we could talk about competing with others later, but they're competing with each other as well. Like there's, because of this masculine or feminine culture, there's guys who are saying, that's not my job to do that. And there's women who are saying, look at how much I do, right? And I just think that the language used is so telling, because what they've got going on is, I do this, I do that. It's a game. They're muddying it in the sense that it's like getting brownie points for themselves. I genuinely, and advice I've given to people is simply change your perspective on it. Rather than saying, look at how much I do, consider how much do I get to do for the other person. And if you were to change that perspective, say, look at how much I get to do for my partner. Look at how much I get to do. This is a blessing Allah has given you.
And let me help you with what you do.
You know, one of the biggest hindrances towards that is when people think about, because to do that, you have to sometimes break the mold. You have to break these cultural barriers. There are cultural expectations. Oh, he's under the thumb, you know what I mean? Who's the man in the house? You know what I mean? Who wears the pants in the house? That kind of thing. But there are cultural barriers which prevent people from actually doing just that, you know, doing the right thing by each other because you want to do them. There was an American nurse who was working in, what's that department called where people see end of life? Palliative care. Bonnie Ware is her name. And she did a study on what people regret when they're dying. Is the biggest study ever done, from my understanding. And she wrote a book on it. And she wrote a book called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I've done a little short video of this a number of years ago. And the number one regret she has from people who are dying, and just bear in mind, when people die, they haven't got time to waste. They're not going to mess about. They're not going to tell fibs. They're just going to say it how it is. The number one regret which people have when they're dying is they say, I wish I lived a life true to myself rather than what other people expected of me. SubhanAllah, just imagine how many of us sometimes maybe not do something for our families, our wife, or, you know, the way we should be living as Muslims because of what somebody else might think of us. This is profound. And this is what prevents a lot of people from doing the right thing by themselves and by their families and others in the community. And you should just stop worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and if it's a hukam of Allah, that's it. Nobody else matters.
I think just on Kamal's point, that this whole thing where you change the terminology, it's not about this is what I'm doing, what are you doing? And I think if you take that deeper and deeper, it comes back to a culture that we live in, which is the liberal culture and the Western culture, is that everything is about you.
Yeah.
Whereas Islam is the total opposite, where actually it's always about someone else.
Yes.
So now you'll see those two cultures. Let's compare them. You look at this society, it destroys a parent-children relationship. It destroys community relationships. It destroys marriage, a brother-sister relationship. Whereas look at the opposite in Islam.
Yeah.
We've spoke about this many times. A brother would pay for his brother's son's wedding. A brother, a father, what he does for his child, and now same with husband and wife. When you've destroyed that basis of this society we live in, and I think that's a daily battle, and that's where feminism and masculinism, this fails to answer those. So
100%.
Definitely, and on Majid's point, very shortly, is that I think that's a separate one. This whole thing about, it's not just Pakistani culture where
versus
I'm
religion,
the man in the house. It's also a street culture.
Yeah.
Some guys have, well, actually, I'm the man. the woman's got to listen to me. This whole masculine.
Like
And actually,
the red pill's making it big
that's right.
again, isn't it? And that,
if you're a man, then you take your responsibility.
100%.
End of.
Yeah. I think.
I remember I was speaking to this. I was 20 years old and I got married, and there was this guy who was working with me, a black guy who was a nice guy, but he was just working with me, and he goes, "Ralph, you got married because you're only 20." And I go, "Yeah, what's your point?" And he goes, "Like, do you want to go out there and like be with loads of?" And I go, "I'll be honest with you, because look, I'm one of those guys. I genuinely think as a man, my job is not to just be there for her when she's like happy to be with me, but also when she's broken, when she's sad, this, that. I'm there to back her up. I'm there to support her." And he goes, "That's deep, cuz that's deep." He goes, then he goes, "You know what's even bigger than that?" He goes, "Imagine having a kid with a girl and you're not even with her." I was like, you just missed the point. You know what I mean? You literally just missed the point. This is literally like, it comes to a bestial kind of an animalistic kind of quality. Anything can reproduce. If it's a living, it reproduces.
Yes,
but I said, but to maintain a relationship, this requires discipline. This requires guidance, and this guidance comes from Allah. It does. And resilience. You require these qualities.
Wisdom. Yeah.
There's a hadith, like there's a common saying when you get married. This is one of the things I heard from some of the elders. कि जिनानी की मुट्ठी विच रखो.
I've heard that.
सिरा पर ना बालो, basically, right? You keep it. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? No offense, but why do you guys have this idea that your women are going to run riot and destroy all you men? I'm confused. Like, you know what I mean? I don't get what do you think is that big danger? If you're talking to them and if you're applying sunnah in your life, I go, we have hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ was cooking food, preparing food for his old daughters who were like teenagers. I mean, we'd turn around and say, "Habardar, I'm not going to even touch a glass. I'm a man."
Bobby's smiling at Bobby, do you touch glasses? Do you do any of the cooking at home?
She's not allowed to. Community's going to shout.
No, just going back to Barry's point about empathy and understanding what the secret ingredients are to marriage, right? Even that phrase, secret ingredients to marriage, it's like a black heart or something, right? And there's you mentioned the book that The Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah.
I'm currently reading that book. I think I'm about halfway through or whatever, yeah. But there's another book, right? And the title of it is What Men Understand About Women. You open page 1, it's blank. You get to page 100 and it's still blank. In other words, men can't get them. How do you read a woman?
Yeah.
And you know,
you're going home today, Bobby.
But the point is, right, I came across his brother just recently. We were talking, right, and he's on about, we were talking about conversations, and he goes, "I don't talk at home." He didn't talk to his wife about any conversations, right? And I've found it alarming, but I understood where he was coming from, because you know this point about in the mud and don't put him in your head. That's how he translated it.
Yeah.
Right. So where do you get empathy and then authority?
Yeah.
It seems to be conflicting, right? So okay, man is the one that lays down the law, but then you're going to understand her as well. So it's like, okay, how do I balance these issues and pull it all together? And I think a lot of the conflicts arise from these issues. So if you, for example, let me just ask a simple question. Do you actually know your wife?
That's an amazing question. You know, there's a very poignant point here. And the point which a lot of men, I'm referring to Muslim men or believing men, miss is that on the day of judgment, you'll have to answer for everything. Now, it's okay saying I'm the man of the house, I'm laying down the law, and I'm the authority, you have to obey me. But to what extent? If the woman feels hard done by and you didn't do anything to rectify yourself, how are you going to answer to that? This is where we have to think about the balance, because she's a human being. Contrary to some of these toxic masculinity kind of posts that go around, there's a responsibility, and that's the key point here, the responsibility. And understand that whatever you do in your house, your children will do after you. Your sons will become you.
Yeah.
You are the leader and you have to lead by example. And true leaders are empowering. They're not diminishing other people's abilities. One of the important things that I've found is a lot of people don't know how to have conversations. They don't know how to communicate. Let me give you a quick example. If a wife is saying that she's unhappy about something or she has certain concerns, she might not be related to you, might be related to the kids or the house or whatever. There's one thing just listening. There's another thing confirming that you've listened. It's a small thing, but it's a very, very effective thing. If somebody said something to you, any relationship. I will use the wife as an example because we're talking about marriage. We'll talk about kids as well. If the wife is saying something to you, rather than saying, repeat what she said. So you're saying this then. Oh, so you're saying this. You don't have to agree. But the fact that you've repeated the statement demonstrates that you've listened. Most people listen to respond and not listen to understand. That's the caveat here. You have to listen to understand.
Yeah.
And just by repeating someone's statements, there's one thing you making a statement in the household, but what about asking the right questions? From a coaching perspective, what I've noticed is when you want somebody or you want to be able to come to a communal agreement or common agreement with somebody, rather than just making your statement and getting them to make their statements, try and ask each other the right questions, intelligent questioning techniques. You ask them the right question, they'll give you the right answer. And if they're buying into an answer, it's their answer, not yours. That's the difference. Because when you're making a statement, I think this should be done this way, I think that should be done that way, and that's it. Who's bought into it? How do you know they're comfortable with that? They might follow it just because you've said it.
Yeah,
but there's no... Sorry, go on.
I think so. Go on.
There's I think an extremely important point both of you guys have touched on right there is there's an idea of authority, and the way it seems like a lot of men end up doing it is there's the idea that men are usually more logical and women are more emotional. That's the stereotype. Of course, the understanding that women are naqsatul aql, for example, what this hadith actually refers to is not that they are lesser in intelligence, because say that Aisha would run circles around everyone and every alim we've ever known of, right? But the point is that they are more prone to be overwhelmed by emotion faster than men are. That men are supposed to be the ones who are less prone to become overwhelmed by emotion. So they should be reasonable enough to understand. What I've seen with a lot of men nowadays is they seem to have a few problems. One is they think that they are smarter than the wives. Simple, and they lack the idea of emotional intelligence. They just think, I know my wife's complained about this. I tell her straight up, yeah, you got a problem with your mom. Lock your mom off. That's not a solution. You've said something, and the problem is that men are trying to use this cold, hard, logical kind of approaches on things that require more emotional, nuanced discussions. So what they end up with is shouting at their wives, shouting at their partners, rather than trying to understand them. The Prophet ﷺ said, women are created from the rib of man. Don't try to straighten her, she will break. She will, you got to now exercise empathy. Yeah. And it all comes back around in that same circle.
Emotional intelligence as well, knowing what to say and how to say it, when to say it, when not to say it. These are very important things when it comes to these conversations. Go on, Barry.
I think we need many series on this. Maj is dropping some pearls today. Swan, like you mentioned that, look, you've been given a responsibility on the day of judgment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will account you on. Even today, you realize before Islam, before the Prophet ﷺ, why do we say that Rasulullah ﷺ is Uswatul Hasanah, the best example to mankind? Because human beings were living like animals before Islam. Relationships, the way women were treated, they were seen as the devil, as evil. All of a sudden, Rasulullah ﷺ came with the Quran and people's lives completely changed.
100%.
Now you look at it, even today there's a debate, who's in charge of the house? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the man is in charge of the house. Today this is a massive debate. They can't even answer the most simplest of questions. But then, like Majid mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you are given this leadership, not to become a dictator, but with this leadership, you have to show a lot of empathy, a lot of companionship, and there's great responsibility, which there'll be great accountability on the day of judgment. 3 words: leadership, responsibility, and then accountability. that puts a man's role, no conflict. It makes him reflect on his responsibility and his leadership. And at night when he's sleeping, thinking, I'll be in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, day of judgment, am I fulfilling my right to my wife, to the children, to these things? I think that's where these points are very, very important.
100%.
Yeah, when just to add to Barry's point, the responsibility, accountability, if it's embedded in you, that would make you very invested in this relationship.
I'm very conscious of any wrongdoing.
That's right. So in 20-year period, you can't say there's no left or right in the relationship. There's no up or down in the relationship. There's a good points, high point, there's a peak, there's also a low point. How invested are you to make sure this works? That accountability and responsibility will ensure you are dedicated and you're going to try your hardest to do these things. One thing that I think is, we started off this conversation with ceremonies. We invited a lot of people, yeah? How many people are still in that journey with you in your marriage 20 years on? What I mean by that is, who do you get your advice from? Who do you chat to? You see, I think relationships such as this, marriage, you cannot do it all by yourself. I think we touched upon individualism, all of this business, but you have to ut and bend with, you have to sit with other people, see how things are. Well, where's marriage going nowadays? What are the trends? What is happening? Okay, how did they resolve it? How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. That investment in the relationship is critical to make it work, I think. And that requires then being open, honest with yourself. I think mentioned these points before, but also with other people. Like yesterday, I went to see an uncle, right? He's approaching, his 70s. He's seen life. And we had this open, frank discussion about the issues in the family related to marriage, right? And he was dropping, like Barry mentioned the point about dropping pearls, right? And there's I goes, Uncle man, this is very helpful for us. Very helpful. And I think that needs to be done more and more and more, because that, I think, is just dwindling away. And that is what a functioning family should look like. You know what I mean? You don't have your Taya or Masi and these kind of things just sitting there just to watch the Masha. It's actually, they've seen life. They've seen a lot of it.
Yeah.
They've heard all the stories and it does concern them. So it's like, okay, let's sit down and talk.
There's a couple of things there, isn't there? There's a proactive way of preventing marriage from going wrong.
Yes.
As in pre-marriage preparations, right? So you prepare before you actually get married, the bride and groom, on what their responsibilities are. And that's our responsibility as parents. It was our parents' responsibility for us, I would say. And it's a community responsibility that parents are equipped to deal with these kind of things for their children. So the community can never escape from it. Our local community, like leadership, talk about the mosques or, the imams and stuff like that. They have that responsibility over us. So we're better equipped to deal with things like that with our children.
Yeah.
Then there's a reactive way of doing things, which you referred to, where the elders have gone through those situations, they've gone through the pitfalls, they've seen the issues, and they've come out with the relevant conclusions to share with the next generation. Don't do this, don't do that. We've seen that, it's ended up badly. That's the reactive way. But there's also an interactive way. So you've got proactive, reactive, and interactive, the middle way. So that's whilst you're in that relationship, how do you deal with that? How do I deal with this particular issue, which I've never come across before, never heard about before? How do I deal with it? Have you ever come across the love languages that they usually talk about in psychologically, what makes people tick? They're called the love languages. I don't know whether you've heard of them.
No.
So there's basically different things that make people tick, right? So different things that people are drawn towards or make them feel better. For example, one is words of affirmation. The other is physical touch, quality time, number 3, acts of service, and receiving gifts. These are 5 common, love languages. Which, how I wonder how many people know which one applies to their husband or their wife.
Do you know why that's very interesting? That's because look, when it comes to in Islam, we say everything is the fardul ain or it's ifaya or something like this. Yeah. So that when your child is reaching the age of puberty, it's fardul ain for them to pray the salah. So they need to study the salah. They need to study what they're going to do for that. When they're about to start a business, it's fard for you to realize what's halal and haram in business. When it's required for you to get married, likewise, it is fard for you to study what's required in marriage. And as marriage is continuous, it's fard for you to study these love languages. There were students that used to have, and I used to talk to them, and they go, yeah, but what about this? I go, look, in Islam, it's necessary for you to treat your wife well and this and that. And they go, what, really? I go, yeah, like you have to do this. Yeah.
Yes,
I go, and they write about all of these things, and they write about this, and they write about how to have a healthy relation. And some of the students were really excited. Like, these are 15, 16-year-olds, and they go, oh, and I go, yeah, the scholars have written on like these kinds of things. What can you say to your wife so she falls more in love with? And these guys, these are school students, right? They probably got a crush on someone, and they're thinking, what can I say now? And I go, wait till you're about to get married. Give me your wedding card first, and then I'll give you some tips. You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you what to say. I'm not going to tell you now. You're going to get carried away and go say it to Jenny at school, right? I don't need to tell you that now. Let's wait it out. Let's wait it out.
Yeah,
but it is a case of continuous learning for yourself. You've got to understand, all right, fine. I've tried to say this before. My wife didn't listen that time. Rather than us butting heads and arguing over this, oh, but it's your fault because I gave you the solution and you didn't listen. That's not sometimes what she wants. Maybe all she needs is someone to vent to. And guess what? She considers you to be that person that she could speak to, she feels comfortable with. Or would you prefer she goes to other people and starts venting all her problems?
But that's what it ends up leading to.
That's what it leads
to.
to.
The problem is most people don't take the time to try and understand each other in relationships. Have you heard of small chunkers and big chunkers in thinking? So basically, small chunkers are people who like attention to detail. They like to know the detail when they're conversating, or when they're planning something. Then they like to know, what am I going to do? What time is this going to happen? When am I going to, that kind of thing. Big chunkers they've got the goal. Come on, let's go. Let's just do it. We'll think about the details on the way. Now, that's not to say one is right and the other is wrong, or one is better and the other one isn't. It's just different.
Yeah, they have their both places, isn't it?
Yeah. So in relationships, you may have two people, one is a small chunker, the other one's a big chunker. Does that mean this is commonly, you'll see a lot of couples are bickering and fighting over small things because of this. Just one point. The wife might say, you need to take the bins out. Husband, all right, I'll do it. Half an hour, 2 hours later, he's still sat there, he's doing something. The wife says, I thought I said you need to take the bins out. He says, yeah, I know. I said I'll do it. It's that going back to that joke about, if you could tell me to do something, don't remind me after 6 months if I've not done it right. Yeah. But he's a big chunker. Yeah, I'll do it. I didn't need to do it at a specific time. But the wife is getting frustrated, and the husband is also getting frustrated because he said he'll do it. He didn't say that he's not going to do it, and he doesn't intend not to do it. But he's
just sitting on TikTok.
Yeah. You don't need to nag me though.
My only issue. Sorry,
but the point being, small chunkers, big chunkers, different way of thinking, different way of looking at things. And then if people aren't available in their mind, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, to try and understand the other, this is why I always talk about understanding yourself first, because if you can't understand yourself, you're going to have a hard time understanding others. Sorry, Barry, go on.
No, sorry. I remember having these discussions with brothers when all these project management Prince courses came out, and I've not got a problem with these sciences, but they have a very limitation.
Yeah, I've done it, and I've never really used it.
Likewise, with these sciences, you're speaking about big chunkers, small chunkers, or even all these science of relationships. Now, everyone's trying to understand that in this society, men and women can't live together. Now, all these sciences, all these courses have come. Everyone's trying to resolve it. But hold on a minute, you know what? Which I feel is a failure on our side is the Quran, the Sunnah of Rasulullah explains all of this to the very minute detail. Study that science and you'll be successful in life.
100%.
Keep away from
Some of these things, though, don't go against the Quran and the Sunnah. But what they're trying to do is they try and explain it in a language we understand. Why is it happening?
This is why I say it has its limitations. So, for example, someone was getting married. I said, Google the 5 causes of divorce. They Googled it. I said, now let's go through every single one of those. Now I'll tell you how Islam stops that from happening. Not deals with it when it happens, but stops that from happening. Yeah. So it's fine. If as long as it's got a certain sensation and reality, but where they got their limitations, they won't give you a solution for it. And Islam gives you that detailed solution. Look at that. Why was it, Kamal, that the marriages of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a lot more detail? Why?
Yeah.
So we could learn from that.
100%.
Why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the end of every night sit with his wives, let them, I've got the Arabic term for it, a Pacific term for this, where they would download on them that time after Isha, in the evening, they would sit, talk. Because why? When people build frustrations in their own heads, something small becomes something very big.
Yeah.
All of these minor details and things to resolve a marriage, and for men and women to live in happiness, in tranquility. All these things are resolved through the Sunnah. That should be something in our homes, in our masjids, that it's a debate now. Kids are doing A levels. Oh my God, mosque stops.
Yeah, like I think a lot of people. They don't,
You know, now, sorry, God, last point, that's where, when you mentioned before that, when actually before someone, even before someone gets married, when they start getting into their latter teenage years, they're looking and thinking about this.
of course.
What courses are we doing in our masjids?
Good question.
And
So-
even in our own homes,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, to prepare them to say, okay, what's a man and a woman relationship like? What's the purpose of this? What's this whole nonsense about love?
Yeah.
What is this?
Like I think people have this false
He
understanding.
had to get
throw
that
it
in.
in.
He had to throw it in.
No.
Nonsense about love.
So I think there's this a big issue that a lot of people. So no doubt, Islam has preventative procedures in place to remove and prevent most of these kinds of problems that will persist throughout marriages, especially the ones that people are experiencing. Therefore, some people start to get this understanding, this false understanding in their minds that if I'm acting according to Quran and Sunnah, if I'm fulfilling my responsibilities, there should be no arguments and no fights in the relationship. What they seem to be ignoring is the human element, the psychological element, and this is a very natural disposition. People differ and argue over the simplest things. All it requires is you didn't do anything wrong, but I don't like the way you didn't support me enough at that moment. And that's upset me. Like there were actual cases, and you are 100% right, Barry. There were times when the Prophet ﷺ basically told Sayyidah Aisha, why does she have the most hadiths narrated? Because he told her, I want you to tell people about what goes on in the home. So we have something to learn from. But there were cases where Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was upset with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or personally, she would say, oh yeah, and like he would call her and say, yeah, Aisha, you know, what about this? And she'd say, oh, what do you want, oh friend of Abu Bakr? Rather than refer, you know, like rather than,
but disagreeing in the most beautiful,
in the most beautiful way, 100%.
With adab.
And that goes back to Kamal's point, that is my last point I was going to touch on. But you know, like even when you disagree, which is going to happen, but you do it in the most beautifulest of ways and the most respectfulest of ways.
Yeah.
Now, how do people disagree? Oh my God.
They're not even living in the same house.
It's like animals.
Yeah, that's true. And then the kids see that.
Yeah.
The neighbors see that. I mean, we see neighbors doing all sorts of flowery things. It's just unbelievable. But Bobby, you were gonna want to say something.
Yeah, you know, homely, who in the relationship, I don't think there's a discussion out there nowadays that says it's all about career, right? Money. But actually, out of the two personalities, man and woman, who's got the homely personality? Do you know what I mean? If we haven't got that as a simple ingredient, and you have to be honest about it, and then this is about in this relation when you walk into it, the rules of the game have to change. If your expectation is that in 5 years' time, both of us will be living on the outskirts of town with a big house, you're going to set yourself up to fail from a home perspective. Do you see? My mum often says that, do you know what? They've got the degrees, they've got the money, they've got everything, but ghar koi nahi. Do you see? That homeliness has to be built. There is something to do with, you know, building
The difference between a house and a home.
And someone's got to invest in that, yeah. And often it is the lady of the house, right? Well, you touched upon, okay, the impact of parents on children and the next generation. I honestly believe it's the lady of the house that has the largest impact on children, and that transcends it's only not only on her children, it's also on their grandchildren as well. She has a huge impact. So you're thinking she's got influence for another 50, 60 years. That's how big influence that the lady has. So when you're not even thinking about this and your emotions are outside, I want to go to the gym, I want to go on holiday, I want to, you know, get this car, right? You're not into this intricate or the subtleties in the relationship. yeah, and how to make things work and satisfy your husband in a nice way, you're doomed to failure.
Well, Allah says that marriage is completing half of your deen. It's not half of your Instagram profile pictures and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not to populate your Instagram feed. It's to complete the deen. Now, this is, again, if we think about it, just for a moment, if marriage is completing half of your deen, what does that actually mean? Completing half of your deen, marriage. So where's the deen in the marriage?
100%.
And just
100%.
going back on, sorry, Bobby, finish.
Yeah, sorry. With the point about this homely, this independent woman construct, right? That is, I think, the most like you speak to the young lads now who are fresh into marriage, right? All of them literally say that is the issue. They point it out, they say feminism. The guys that want to get married, they're pointing it out. You know what, girls, have you seen them nowadays? So now you're like thinking, hang on, there's something wrong. They want something like my mum calls it grelu,
Yeah,
right? Homely, right? So therefore, some people are saying now, okay, it's better going abroad to get that because you're not going to get that kind of personality in this country that can sit at home, that can maintain the home, and it's not just from a clean the home and this and do the links with the neighbors, the community, do you know that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a
not
common thing, isn't it? When people say, "Oh, women's got to stay at home," they have this image of the woman cooking, cleaning, and washing the dishes and ironing the clothes, and that's what being at home means. But actually, it means beyond that. It's the relationship building with the children, the mentoring the children. Like you said, relationship with the neighbors,
maintaining your honor as a household, as a family, and
your honor as a
I think that's
household.
a big thing. Yeah,
I think the point being is we live in a society, media, now social media, it makes us chase the wrong goose that we think is going to lay the golden egg. Always, whether it's youth, it'll make you chase material things, it'll make you chase love, all these nonsense things. And I think in a marriage, I hate, just as to put it out there first, this whole masculine culture. Islam, it solves that in a better way. I think this is nonsense, if I'm honest. But talking about the feminist culture, I think women in this society, it makes them chase the wrong goose, thinking it's going to lay the golden egg, and that's outside of the home. Inside of them, well, what's wrong even with cooking and cleaning?
You know, the last time when sorry to put you short, I'm just came to my mind. Last time we were discussing something similar, somebody reached out and said it's a very masculine. What was the term that they used that we sound? I said misogynist way that we're discussing these things because there's no female on the panel.
But even if you look at that, you see the misogynists have got it wrong, the feminists have got it wrong. Islam answered this many.
We're flawed. Human beings, we're flawed as Muslims, as a follower of a faith. We're followers. We can't get it always right, but we should try. Bobby, you were going to say.
Household, sorry, to answer Bobby's point. Imagine now, even for guys, material will end when you go to your grave.
Yeah.
You'll not leave any legacy behind. You can have the best business, the best career, the biggest house. It'll be finished when you enter your grave. The biggest thing you'll leave behind, not just for 50 years, Bobby, for generations to come, is the awlad, is the children. Now, that golden egg and that goose, who's going to invest in that? You should be fighting for that, really.
We think of sadaqah jariyah, but there's also the opposite. When you do guna in a certain way, or you don't do what you're supposed to do for the family, and that transcends into a launching of so many negative things within the next generations. Who's going to carry that sin?
Yeah,
it's you. So if you're not on the straight and narrow, like trying to do the right thing by I think people are very short-sighted. They think about the nucleus family. They think about only their own household, but they don't think about the effects of what they're doing, instilling in their kids, and how their kids are going to then translate that into how they should be dealing with their own kids. It goes on for generations.
And why is it when people retire or leave work, they hear a certain thing rings in their head, thinking, "Oh my God, actually, what can I leave behind me now? What community work can I do? What can I do for my families?" Actually, they realize the wealth and the money has a limitation, but actually, the legacy you're going to leave behind and take to your grave is going to be things like the way you raise your children. What have you done for the betterment of your community? What have you done for your Muslim ummah? And those things, when it comes to a husband and wife relationship, should be okay. If I can be the breadwinner, or if you've both got to work, then how can you work maybe part time or work from home? So because I met one of the brothers from this area, and he was saying to me, I worked from home last night. Actually, I bumped into him for the last 7 years, and I would never work, even though I've had opportunity to earn more money. I would never go back to the office because I can spend so much more time at home, dropping the kids to school, picking them up, that family time, because that's your biggest goose that's going to lay the biggest golden egg.
Sorry, what I'm doing. Bobby, final word from you, and then we'll round up.
Yeah. Do you know, recently my khala, they passed away. Allah give them Jannah.
I mean,
one of the qualities that people, they talk good about the people that passed away, and a lot of people, the son-in-laws, they were saying that they never complained ever, and they saw a tough time, right? It just so happened when they passed away, I was the one that had to break the news to the uncle, okay? And as soon as I did that, we sat down and they did dua for the mahala straight away, right? And I found that so warm, right? A few days later, they were telling me that I've started doing 2 extra nafal salah.
I remember you telling me this.
Yeah.
Profound.
2 extra nafal every day for my wife for forgiveness, yeah. And then they couldn't let her clothes go. They've been married, 50 plus years, right? So when I was listening to Uncle all about this, I was like, you know what? That's what you call a relationship.
Yes.
And they never complained.
And love.
Yeah.
That is love, yeah.
That's love, Barry.
that's love, guys. Not this.
Yeah. But still,
It's not this nonsense now about this society. That's love.
And it dawned on me, they'd been married for 50 plus years. The actually time that they spent with their parents was actually quite short. It's only about 15 to 20 years because they got married in their teenage years. So majority of your life will be in marriage.
Yes. Most of your life will be in marriage, and less of your life will be in elsewhere. Right. Just to wrap up, lads, 30 seconds. Final words. If you were to be asked what makes a successful relationship and a marriage, what would you say? We'll start off with you, Cam.
I think, alhamdulillah, most of it's already kind of been said. So I'd like to just add what this, I read in this meme from this very old couple. And the old woman, she was asked, what makes a good marriage? And she goes, it's about communication, just communicate. Ask the man, what do you think? And he said, earplugs. No, but genuinely speaking, communication is key whenever people are struggling, but try to be understanding. Understand that there's more than your own understanding of the situation, and try to get into the other person's mind. Try to understand it from their perspective. They might be seeing you as part of the problem. So learn how to eject yourself from that, not by saying, I'm not the problem, but by actually understanding the way you are behaving, you could be the problem. Just to touch on the misogyny point that they mentioned in the comment section, there's a reason why whenever I try to speak about these issues, I try to speak about what it is from the man's side. Men could do better to have a better relationship. I'm not trying to assume what women believe or what they think. You're right, it's going to be blank pages. But what we try to do is say, how can we improve ourselves? And then hopefully other people will also try to improve themselves.
Sure. Bobby?
I think committed. You got to be committed to this. And that will be my one word answer.
Commitment, yeah?
Commitment.
Nice one. Barry?
I think for me, one of the biggest life lessons in my own life, and I think for everyone else out there, marriage, is that sometimes I expected too much from human beings. So mashallah, I always had sincere people around me advising me, and a lot of the things that constantly came out was, I think you're expecting too much. Human beings will always make mistakes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them weak, not perfect. They're not angels. So I think when you're in a relationship, be realistic. Don't expect too much. Understand your husband or your wife is going to make mistakes. She's going to trip up. Be forgiving, be understanding, and build each other to be better, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. Well, there you have it, guys. That's our possibly we may make a comeback on the marriage topics. But if you haven't also already done so, watch the first two. That's pre-marriage, as in marrying at an earlier age and the pros and cons of that, and then how to choose a spouse. And do leave your thoughts in the comment section. We'd like to hear your views. What makes a successful marriage? Until the next one, Assalamu alaikum.